The rising sea level and increased frequency of coastal flooding has affected my community because we have one access road to the island that sits very low relative to sea level, and when we have king tides, that road floods, and those seem to be happening with more frequency and flooding the road for longer periods of time. So that's a big problem for us. What we've done to deal with that is work very hard to appeal to county, state, federal officials to do something about the situation, to raise the road bed. We have some other issues that needs to be widened and bridges need to be replaced, but we've tried to get funding and permits to actually do something about it. It's outside of our municipal jurisdiction, so it's a bit of a challenge, but that's been our response to it. No, and even if we could, since this particular stretch of road isn't in our city's jurisdiction, we wouldn't even be able to fund it if we wanted to. So it's an extremely expensive project, well over $100 million. But it's on federal land, goes through the marsh, in county jurisdiction, and it's a state highway, so it has all of the bureaucratic obstacles that come with a complex transportation project. But we have seen more frequent instances of that roadway being covered with water, and that completely cuts off access to our island for hours at a time. I don't know that there are any other places in America with an island quite like us that is relatively densely populated, that's completely isolated from the mainland for vehicular traffic. The support our community needs is having some logical decisions made at higher levels of government to address the problems that we're facing. So one problem is our roadway. Another problem is the possibility if we do get hit by a hurricane, a major hurricane like what hit Mexico just yesterday, storm surge. So we are dealing with rising flood insurance premiums, and it stands to reason that our country, I think, is being penny wise and pound foolish by not investing in things like building dunes that would ultimately cost far less than what the federal flood insurance program has to pay to rebuild homes after a significant storm event on the coast. We saw that with Hurricane Sandy, where there were areas where there were dunes, and behind the dunes, little to no damage, and areas where there were no dunes because communities weren't able to galvanize their citizens to support that project, and those communities were hit very hard. And consequently, the federal flood insurance program had to pay out much higher for those communities than they did for the ones that had dunes. So I think that the folks at FEMA and the folks at the Corps should interface and get Congress to start enacting common sense legislation and funding to save money down the road. I think our community, on those two issues that I mentioned, my community has supported what we're trying to do in terms of dealing with the fact that our road is covered with water, our only access road. So that's kind of a no-brainer. Nobody disagrees with that. And because people are impacted by high flood insurance premiums, and because they don't want to be impacted by a major storm surge, they have been supportive, unlike other communities, of us renourishing our beach regularly, not only building a berm, but also doing what we can to plant sea oats and put out snow fencing to build dunes. What I'd like to do is come up with a way to fill in the gaps. We have certain areas of the island where there aren't any, where there are gaps in our dune system, or there aren't any dunes at all, and I'd like to do what we can to, if we have to, artificially build those dunes up. That'll take an investment.
So is that just a question of money, or do you still need to convince the people to support you to do that?
I think it's a question of money, but I think a lot of it would have to come from the locals, so therefore you have to convince the local community that that's something that we should invest in instead of buying something else, using it for infrastructure projects or whatever. I mean, I look at the dunes as infrastructure, so it's something I feel strongly about, but it's a matter of then convincing our voters and our property owners and our citizens that that's a wise use of city resources. I think the fact that you have such a large group from both political parties sitting down at the table looking at practical solutions to the problems that we're facing is extremely important. It's the first time I've ever seen that happen. I know this has been going on for a number of years, but this is a pretty big group. It's my first time being here. And it's very refreshing to sit down with people who are dealing with the same situation that I'm dealing with in our community. So it's been a good opportunity to network and brainstorm some ideas. I've learned a lot while I've been here, but I think that also if we can speak collectively on the coast with one voice, I think that will ultimately be what will convince Congress and states to start to take this problem seriously. A lot of communities have a beach renourishment project that is sunsetting. Almost all of ours are sunsetting in the next couple of years. We had these 50-year agreements with the federal government, and those seem to be going away. And Congress did, I was kind of shocked, they did actually enact legislation to allow us to continue those for 15 years. What I'd like to see is for a group to come together at the congressional level and look at the issues with flood insurance. The flood insurance program is underwater, and with what they can do through the Army Corps with their civil works projects to build barriers, basically dunes and other things, to get those two forces together to come up with some logical legislation that won't just be a Band-Aid for 15 years, but will actually have develop a long-term solution to this that will, at the end of the day, save taxpayer dollars.